Well, Bernadette, lovely to catch up with you, and it's so lovely to see that blue sky behind you. I understand it's what, mid-20s temperature in Southland today.
Yeah, I'm actually cooking sitting out here. It's beautiful.
Now, the next question, a leading question, have you always been rebellious?
Absolutely not. In fact, anybody that knows me would absolutely roll laughing at that question. I'm not a rebellious person at all, and I'm not a confrontational person either. But I am quite a principled person, and I just can't deal with the absolute waste that this resource consenting process is going to drive. And we know we're doing a really good job, and the resource consent is going to make no difference to that. Yet it'll see us thousands of dollars out of pocket, and we could put that money into something really productive.
So what are you doing now? What are you supposed to be doing, should I say?
Yeah, so right now we're planting our crops, and so we when we do that, we put a plan in place. We identify what the risks are that the particular paddocks will pose. We identify the mitigations that will help address those risks and make sure that we don't damage the environment or cause issues for animal welfare when we do graze these paddocks in the wintertime. So we think way ahead. We're making those plans right now. And that's why a farm plan process would have worked perfectly for us. We make those plans anyway. All the farm plan would have required was that somebody else has a look at that plan and goes, yep, actually the mitigations you're putting in place will work for the situation you're in. Tick, you go get on with the job. But instead, because we don't have those, we now have to, if we're going to follow the rules, apply for a resource consent, and regional councils have to go through quite a process to grant that consent or not grant it. And that's the other problem we've got. If they say no, then what are we supposed to do with all our animals for the winter?
Now, did not the Southland Council sort of give a reprieve?
Sort of. So they've tried to create an easier process for farmers, but it only helps a few farmers. What they've created is called a deemed permitted activity. And if you can comply with all of the rules except for the slope rule, so you can do everything required except that you have your winter grazing on a paddock that's steeper than 10 degrees, then you can go down this alternative pathway that they're proposing. But the reality is, people who have slopes will also have critical source areas. So therefore, they're probably not going to be able to meet all the other rules. And it actually doesn't solve the problem. There's still needless bureaucracy and cost to do what we're just getting on with and doing anyway.
And have you found solidarity? I mean, all your local farmers standing by you effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. So 12 of us from Southland Federated Farmers took to the stage on Wednesday evening at a large meeting in Invercargill. 12 of us stood together and made this call that we wouldn't be getting consent. And hundreds of people that were in the room with us stood spontaneously at the time as well. We estimate there was about 800 people in the room, and the vast majority of people in that room stood. So yeah, huge support. And I've had a massive amount of emails and texts and messages and phone calls since then as well from people all around the country who back us too.
So I guess the question remains, what happens next, do you think?
I don't know. It remains to be seen. Look, I'm certainly not looking for trouble, and we'll be doing everything right with our winter grazing, making sure that we do put everything we need to in place to make sure we're not doing any harm by the practice we do during the winter. And we call for all farmers to do the same. Look, federated farmers, nor any farmer is going to apologise for or defend people who don't get this practice right. We know what we need to do. There's well-established industry guidelines that we need to be following. So people need to do it right. But our argument is that a piece of paper that costs ridiculous amounts of money to get is not going to help that process. And interestingly, the estimates are, and government's estimate as well as industry estimates are, that about 10,000 people will need these consents. If you conservatively say they might cost a couple of $1,000s each, that's $20 million down a bureaucratic hole that could have gone to something really beneficial.
Now, the meeting was Wednesday night. Tell us how that went.
So the meeting was in two parts. We canvassed the He Waka Eke Noa climate policy situation as well, and then the winter grazing. There was some really strong feeling in the room. Farmers are feeling scared. They're feeling very unsettled. They're feeling very targeted on both pieces of legislation. I think they were very grateful for hearing that Federated Farmers is taking a strong stand on both issues. And with regards to He Waka Eke Noa, there's an important meeting tonight for the Federated Farmers National Council to make a decision about their direction, because that's an important thing about Federated Farmers. It's bottom up. So the national board can't just run off in a direction. They have to get the approval and the agreement of their membership base to do that. And they were canvassing their proposed solution at that meeting. Look, there's some farmers that are absolutely opposed to paying any kind of emissions tax on agricultural emissions. Food security is a huge issue worldwide, cost of living, those kinds of things. And the reality is it's fossil fuel use that's driving the key issues with the climate. But Feds were proposing a kind of a middle ground. The key things are that the Feds is demanding that there's a review to the targets. At the moment, the targets for the agricultural sector will see us reducing emissions by far more than our contribution to global warming. So effectively offsetting other people's emissions, and that's not fair. If there's a review of the targets, then we'll engage in discussion about a pricing policy that won't drive emissions offshore to somewhere that produces the same food at a higher emissions cost, and that will incentivize the uptake of good technology to support the reduction of emissions rather than just reducing how much we produce. So that's the proposal that was being canvassed at the meeting. It's the proposal that will be voted on tonight by the Feds National Council, and if successful, that will be Feds' position going forward.